Well, I am back. It has been a very exhausting couple weeks, heck, it's been a pretty exhausting couple months between the Fringe, between cleaning up after the Fringe, and even being in preparation to hunt down the founder, who, as many might recall from the last episode of the Cinema Schlock Society, has gone missing. So, to find out what happened to him, keep your eyes on Narcotic Casserole, because we're going to have the next episode of Cinema Schlock Society. But I have not been idle in the past couple months. I still had time to go see some movies, and this is just going to be me catching up, reviewing all the movies that I had seen that I never got a chance to review. So let's go in chronological order, shall we? Hotel Artemis was written and directed by Drew Pearce, who is also the co-writer on Iron Man 3. This film intrigued me from the trailer. The trailer was excellent because it had a really cool premise. Yes, there have been comparisons made to John Wick, and I can see where they're coming from. But this one kind of takes place in a less polished world, and it's not so much this network of assassins. This is just little outposts for the criminal underbelly. And there are some really cool ideas to be had in it. I'd say my major beef with this movie is that even though the whole thing takes place in a centralized location, and it has some standout performances from Jodie Foster, Dave Bautista, Sterling K. Brown, and Sofia Boutella, I think the major problem with this movie is a severe, and I mean severe, lack of focus plot-wise. You got all these characters with their own modus operandi and their own reason for being here. And unfortunately, when you're focused on one plot line, all of a sudden another plot line comes in, and it's a drastically different one that has nothing to do with what's going on over on the other side, and it gets really distracting when you want to focus on this other plot line. In fact, the trailer kind of lies to you. You think the whole movie's going to involve this portable safe with a crap ton of priceless diamonds that Sterling K. Brown steals, and you think that it's going to be about this hotel being under siege, and that the one night when rules get broken, everything goes to hell. You think that that's what the movie's going to focus on, but instead you've got all these different subplots regarding some of the characters, and the movie just goes all over the place, and you don't really get a chance to enjoy the madness that happens here. In fact, you've got Jeff Goldblum, who pops in as the big-time mob boss, and as fun as that sounds, and for what little he has to work with, it's enjoyable, but at the same time, you feel like you could have got a bit more out of him, especially considering you also had Zachary Quinto in the film playing his very overzealous, very dim-witted son. And all of that could have been so much fun if the plot had had better focus. And I think that's the major problem. In fact, with even better focus, we could have actually given Charlie Day something to do. Now, I feel bad. I just ragged on Charlie Day in Pacific Rim. I don't want to rag on him. The guy's talented, but by God, they gave him nothing to work with except be a dick. That was him the entire movie. So, really, in summation, Hotel Artemis is an absolute mess, and I feel bad because it's a good-looking film with a really strong premise, and the actors are really giving it their all, especially Foster, Bautista, Boutella, and Sterling K. Brown. But in the end, I'm going to have to give it a... So moving on to one of the major tentpole movies that have come out. Now, this one, of course, had something of a dark cloud over it in the wake of the disappointment that was the 2016 Ghostbusters. However, this one, I am very happy to report, learned from the mistakes of that movie and actually made an enjoyable film on its own terms, but yet made for a good continuation of a beloved franchise. Of course, I'm referring to... The important thing to note about Ocean's 8 is that this is not a reboot by any stretch of the imagination. This is a sequel. This is a continuation of the Ocean's franchise. Inasmuch that Debbie Ocean, played by Sandra Bullock, is the younger sister of Danny Ocean. Now, where Danny Ocean is, the movie says he's this thing. I'm not going to give anything away on this one because that's part of the fun. That's always been the fun of the Ocean's movies. But the movie says that Danny is this one thing, but you have suspicions. And even though the movie doesn't really verify your suspicions, you still get that feeling that there's more going on there than is being laid out. From the get-go, it tells you, it assures you, no, this is a continuation of the franchise that you fell in love with the first three films, and we're just moving forward from there, and that's great. You have appearances from some of the cast members of the other Ocean's movies, and they are very welcome. We get a whole completely different set of characters with their own talents and their own backgrounds. They don't try to make clones of the characters from the first set of movies. They do their own things. And all of them stand out in their own way. Cate Blanchett's character is not a clone of Brad Pitt's character. She seemed to have much more authority. You seem to be able to take her as an authority figure a heck of a lot more than Brad Pitt. He seemed to be a bit more lackadaisical, where she's more no-nonsense, and I like that about her. And that's actually the thing that kind of permeated with a lot of the characters. You had a lot of people on this crew that were very no-nonsense. You had Rihanna as Nineball, who you definitely looked at her like, oh, this is a person who knows what she's doing, and she does not like people doubting it. And you definitely look at her skills, and you're like, yeah, girl got skills. And the cool thing about this movie is that it does take advantage of the fact that this is a gender-swapped crew. This is entirely women. And what's even more interesting is that they have a unique reason as to why it has to be all women. They actually openly say, this heist needs to be done by women because they're the only ones who are going to be able to maneuver under the radar during this whole thing. And the heist seems to lend a lot more to that idea. This film has a lot in common with Ocean's 11 on a narrative level. Heck, it even starts virtually the exact same way in a, to be honest, less than convincing parole room. It looks like a hallway. Who does a parole hearing in a hallway? Debbie Ocean actually has her own motives for this, and while Danny definitely had his own modus operandi in the first film, hers you kind of get behind a bit more because it's less petty and it's more, yeah, this needs to be done because the reason you're doing it is totally justified. I will say this does hit the similar narrative beats of the first film because I will say I'm a rabid fan of the Oceans franchise. I do love all three of them. Yes, I even enjoy 12 to an extent. You never get that feeling in this one that things are going to go completely to hell. There may be a couple speed bumps, but none of it ever feels tense. So this one definitely feels a lot like Ocean's 11 in that regard, because that one also didn't have a lot of tension in spots. And I hope the film does really well, because I would like to see a continuation with these characters. Heck, I would love the time to come when they do a big epic crossover and call it simply Oceans. Though it is incredibly familiar, Ocean's 8 is a lot of fun. I am happily going to buy it when it comes out. When I binge the other three films, I'm going to binge this one alongside it. So with that, I'm going to give Ocean's 8... So, moving on from the franchise film that people didn't realize they may want, over to the franchise film that everyone has wanted, going all the way back to at the end of the first one, back in the early 00s. Yeah, I'm talking about... The thing I find overly miraculous about this, now, it's always been said, sequels, especially long delayed sequels, tend to disappoint to a very severe extent. There's been a lot of great examples of delayed sequels that just never fit the bill. But there are the rare occasions where a delayed sequel actually winds up blowing our minds. What's impressive about this film is that it throws you right into the thick of it, practically from where you left him at the end of the first film. The years just kind of blow away. I mean, as quickly as Dash. It's kind of amazing for that. I was going to say incredible. I'm not going to say it. As everyone knows, in the first film, superheroes got banned. And the end of the first movie, you thought that that got resolved outright. This film says, no, this is something that was going to take some time, and they're still not on board with that yet. Superheroes are still illegal. But superheroes are out in the open again, and they're just going to keep doing what they're doing because they want to. But I like that that level of recklessness still has consequences at the kickoff of the movie. But I also like that the film explores why, if you have superheroes, why not use them? But simultaneously, the other side of the spectrum, superheroes do need to have a better image in order to get people to start trusting them again. In many ways, you could say it explored stuff from Civil War that maybe they didn't get a chance to, that they're exploring right here. And that was fun. But the thing that the film never loses focus on is the family dynamic. And that's where this film shines just as much as the first one. I would even say even more in this one, because now the power dynamic has changed, where now Elastigirl is being commissioned to be the new face of superheroes. And you can actually see why, because she's much more level-headed, she's much more cool under pressure, and she has a bit more grace. And there's an absolutely hair-raising chase sequence involving an L train, and she's driving around this really tricked out motorcycle, which actually is very accommodating to her abilities. I'm not going to spoil the intricacies of that particular chase scene, but rest assured that motorcycle is sort of the backbone of what makes that whole action sequence a bit white knuckle. On the other side, you've got Bob, who now has to actually take the time to focus on being a family man and realizing he is something out of his league. But what's really cool is that the kids aren't oblivious to it. They actually see that he's having a hard time, and there actually comes a point in the story where they actually do help him out. And of course, the major focus of trouble revolves around Jack, when now they are fully aware that this child has not only one ability, but a crap ton, and they are chaos, a living embodiment of chaos. Now, many people don't know this about me. I love raccoons. Of course, Rocket Raccoon is a prime example, but I love the Sly Cooper franchise. There's a fight sequence between Jack and a raccoon, and first off, I got to admire the raccoon for being tenacious enough to think he could take on a superpowered baby, but at the same time, I'm like going, just let the thing have a chicken leg, for crying out loud. You got it better than he does. But I kind of would like it if they make a third one sometime soon to see the battle between Jack and this raccoon just go on. Or even another Pixar short film, kind of like how they did Jack Attack. I would like to see a continuing one where you see the continuing fight between Jack and this raccoon. I think you could get some mileage out of that. Incredibles 2 has a great focus on its emotional core. It definitely progresses things significantly from the first film. So as a sequel, it is totally worth it. It definitely makes up for all the years that we wanted this film and never got it until now. The only element of this film that may be lacking, but not so much that it makes me want to just drop a whole bunch of points on it, I'd say is mainly the villain. It's not so much that the villain had a weak motive or anything like that. In fact, actually, I was very impressed about how emotional it was. But I'd say it was more just the fact that you kind of see it coming. Disney seems to have this penchant right now for doing the villain revealed thing, like they make the villain a mystery and then the big reveal. I like it, especially if it's played really well. But the reveal on this one is one you kind of see coming, and it doesn't really make you go, wow. In fact, problem is when you can see it coming before the characters who should be seeing it coming before you, then you feel like, oh, how come you didn't see this? But like I said, this is a minor niggle. It does not destroy my feelings towards the film as a whole. It's just one of those little things which, especially when you compare it to Syndrome in the first movie, who, for all intents and purposes, is a almost horrifying caricature of toxic fandom gone awry. Villain's motives in this film do make a lot of sense. You do feel for said villain. And juxtaposing it with another character who this character is closely knit with does a really good job showing both sides of a particular argument that has permeated through both of these films. But really, you're still going, compared to Syndrome, it's pretty weak by comparison. So that being said, Incredibles 2. Moving on, this one came out actually before Incredibles 2, but this was a film that was generating a lot of buzz, and I was finally motivated to go see this because of said buzz. I've been feeling very remiss when it comes to horror recently, so I kind of wanted to jump in and see some of the horror movies that have actually been getting some good buzz. I saw A Quiet Place, enjoyed it, some plot holes, but I really enjoyed. And then there was this one that had some very cryptic advertising, like the kind of stuff that had some very provocative imagery. And then I walk in, really kind of hyped up. I was in an empty theater, so that kind of helped with the atmosphere. But then I walk out, and then I'm just like, what the fresh did I just watch? I saw this one yesterday, and I'm still at war with myself as to what I truly feel about it. So let's kind of focus on the things I can definitely tell you I feel very strongly about. First off, on a technical level, this is an incredibly well-made film. This film has an incredible awareness of horror tropes and how to play with them. And it also does a really great job with slow burn horror. This is the kind of horror that's akin to stuff like Rosemary's Baby or The Omen. This is about atmosphere. This is about cultivating a sense of dread all throughout. But it's also a meditation of a particular form of psychology. Actually, another film that came to my mind when I walked out was The Babadook, which is a film I thoroughly enjoyed. And I will still say is probably more superior to this film. We'll get into those details in a bit. The film actually utilizes a lot of lingering shots. You know how horror films always rely on cheap jump scares, and they usually come accompanied with a... This film doesn't resort to those particular types of cheap jump scares. There are jump scares in this film, but the way they utilize it, they use misdirect, where it draws your focus to something else and then hits you with something else that comes into the scene. And it feels natural, and it has a nice flow. It doesn't interrupt the momentum of the scene, and it makes you feel uneasy and even to an extent disorienting. But the real focus of fear that really makes this film work are the times where you just see something. Either something lingering in the corner in the background. You can see this thing up in this corner, and you know it's there. And the thing that's drawing your attention about it is you don't know what's going to happen. It's all about, is this thing going to jump down and attack somebody? Is it just going to just sit there and watch, which in and itself is unnerving? You don't know. And I got to commend the film for being able to play with an audience's sense of anticipation. When something happens, it definitely delivers in ways you could never anticipate. And that's the thing that's definitely in this movie's favor. The performances are through the freaking roof, especially Toni Collette. She just always blows my mind. You have Gabriel Byrne. He plays a very understated, very skeptical father figure character who tries his best to be outgoing and tries his best to be consoling, but simultaneously you can see the frustration in his face where he wants to say things, but he can't. Meanwhile, you've got the son, who I feel bad the actor's name has completely abandoned me. Thank you. He was in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, and for the brief span you see him in that movie, leaves a very strong impression, but by God, does he leave a bigger impression in this film. What's interesting in the narrative progression, you think that Toni Collette's going to be like the entire focus of this film. You think it's going to be like the mom in The Babadook. And while she definitely has a lot of the film, he ultimately becomes the main focus. He carries this sense of melancholy, a sense of burying not just grief, but also burying a lot of emotional baggage just regarding his feelings about his family, in particular his mother. And this is all stuff that you see when you meet him in the beginning, but then you see it all bubble up gradually as the film progresses. And when it all culminates in that final climax at the end of the movie, you definitely feel that this character arc went all out at the very end. Meanwhile, you've also got the daughter of the family. She's been trotted out as the primary advertising icon of this movie, and she definitely does represent the core of the story of this film. And something happens with this character that happens pretty early on in the movie. I was expecting it to happen maybe a little bit later, but when it happens, I was this. I could not believe I saw what I saw. Most horror movies tend to shy away from what you witness with this character. But because this particular thing happens, it makes the rest of the film just come ablaze. What was the thing that made me go, what the... Now, like I said, I'm a really big fan of the movie The Babadook. I love that film because it played with your perception of reality. Was everything here happening? Was it not? Was this all just a manifestation of the character's psyche? You don't know. And even at the very end, they leave it ambiguous as to whether or not everything that you saw was all psychological or was this for real. The way this film was kicking off and the way things were progressing, I kind of hoped that it would go that route, because this film kicks off tackling some very heavy issues with family, in particular dealing with grief and loss. There is a sequence with Toni Collette where she acts the hell out of it, and I was almost on the verge of tears too, because it was so well executed. But then the film does, I don't want to say it's a just turn on a dime about face, particularly when you take into account that the film actually led into this. If you reflect on it, you're like, oh, okay, they did foreshadow that it was going to lead to this point. But you weren't thinking about it because of all the heavy subject matter that it was tackling. But then all of a sudden it jumps right into a spiritual side to it. And then the film becomes something more like Rosemary's Baby. That's where the Rosemary's Baby angle comes in. And then all of a sudden it becomes very paranormal. Then it becomes about seances, witchcraft, and It's not in your head, it is being played for real. And I admit I was a bit disappointed that they kind of went a very pedestrian route. Sometimes the scariest stories that we ourselves can think up are the stories that we formulate in our heads regarding our own world around us. Do our family members resent us? Do they hate us? Am I just destroying everything? Am I making everything worse just by being here? And I thought this film was going to get into that. And because the story just shifts and goes this direction, I feel like all that potential just got kind of squandered. Don't take this as me just saying that it ruins the entire movie for me. I just felt disappointed that I didn't want to explore the possibility that all these characters are dealing with deep-rooted psychological grief that is coming out and threatening to tear this whole family apart. Because the film went the route it did, it reduced what was an incredibly well-made film to something a bit more pedestrian, and that is a bit disappointing. And I was hoping against hope that this would be the mammoth giant that everyone was making it out to be. Maybe it got overhyped for me. Maybe another watching could improve it, and I'm sure it will when it comes to very rich atmosphere, very solid use of unique camera angles, and exceptional performances from all the cast. That elevates Hereditary to the point where I'm going to give it a rating of... So that's me all caught up. So now, what's next? Well, of course, I'm going to do my review of Jurassic World: The Fallen Kingdom when that comes around. When I can fit it in between bouts of playing Jurassic World Alive. Yes, I admit I'm kind of getting addicted to that. Meanwhile, I'm also going to have retrospective reviews of all the other Star Wars movies featuring myself and Lynn, where we're also going to reflect on where we were when these movies came out, or at the very least when we first encountered them. So you have that to look forward to. But most importantly, hashtag, because the founder's gone missing, and the Cinema Schlock Society may be changed forever if we don't find him. So keep your eyes on Narcotic Casserole. Coming soon, we will find out what happened to the founder, and hopefully the Cinema Schlock Society will not die. In the meantime, for more addictive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click, thou shalt be served.